Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Thursday, June 25th, City Commission Budget Work Session number 2 to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo, Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell is absent. Commissioner Omari Hardy is absent. Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here. If everyone would please rise for the pledge led by Commissioner Robinson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go right into it. We've got a lot here. Presentation of the capital plan for FY 2021 budget. City Manager, did you want to start, or Bruce, would you like to start?
Madam Mayor, thank you very much, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, we're going to be going over the other part of the budget. We covered at the last workshop the various funds, really focusing on sensitivity towards the expense side of the budget. And with this one, we're going to be looking at the capital plan for the city going forward. So without any further delay, I'll go ahead and introduce Bruce Miller, the Finance Director for the city, and he'll pick up the presentation from there.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Again, this is a pro forma, a roll forward of the fiscal year 2020 plan, both on the capital side and on the sales tax side. The intent really is to have a understanding or sensitivity relative to what the capital budget is, and have a conversation as we move forward during the budget process of what funding strategies we may want to adopt given the budget constraints that were introduced to you in the presentation one. As we know, some funds have more flexibility than other funds, so we have to find a balance relative to what to include and what not to include, and what those funding sources will be. Just so that everybody has a familiarity, I want to start with the 54 pages of the detailed spreadsheet. If you could bring that up for me, Keith. And don't be overly concerned. I'm not going to go through all 54 pages at this meeting. But if we just start on page 1, I just want to give you a flavor of how this works, and then we'll go over to the presentation itself. This is the detail, and all the subtotals you'll be able to match over to the presentation. But this is the detail of each program or project for each fiscal year. If you would turn to page, 2, you'll see that it goes fiscal year 21, then goes fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. And then it rolls down through the different funds. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I just want you to have a familiarity so that if you do want to get into the detail of the different programs or the different projects by fund and by year, it's captured on this schedule. So if we can go now to the PowerPoint, I'll spend the rest of the time on the PowerPoint unless there's any questions, and we can move back to the more detailed schedule. So again, the presentation overview, starting with page 2. I'm going to start with fiscal year 2020, just to go through the multi-year plan, discuss what in aggregate numbers, what was funded, what was not, then go to the 21 projects, and then conclude the presentation by looking at the constraints by fund. And I think you'll start seeing, what constraints we're going to have as we move forward. So if we can turn to page 3. Again, this is just the overview from the 2020. The general fund, by these different categories, we have government facilities and land, park of commerce and commercial incentives, library facilities, leisure services facilities and parks, street maintenance, system capitalization. That's primarily the combined utilities and the IT software and hardware. So the primary funds are the general fund, beach fund, golf fund, garage fund, IT fund, CIP, and then the combined utilities. Again, the combined utilities is, the detail is on that schedule, and it's just a roll up from there. So in fiscal year 2020, the general fund had $4.7 million of recommended projects. The beach fund had $680,000. The golf fund, 125, the IT fund, 400,000, CIP, $467,000, the combined utility initiative of $42 million. So all in of about $48.5 million of requested CIP projects. Now, if we turn to page 4, what we'll see is how those projects were funded. So in the general fund, we had $191,000 coming from current year revenues, nothing from fund balance, grants and other sources of 1.9, and then sales tax pledge revenue bond of $1.8 million. So we funded $3.9 million from those various sources of funds from the $4.7 million of the previous page of request. So we had a residual amount of not funded of $762,000. Those projects have not gone away. A lot of them are deferred programs, deferred maintenance, things that probably should be considered as we move forward. But we just did not have the funding capacity in fiscal year 20 to move to fund everything. So this is going to be an important topic as we move forward to the following pages. The beach fund, again, of the $680,000 of requests, we funded $530,000, $280 from the pledge revenue bond on sales tax, and $250,000 from current revenues. So we didn't fund $150,000 from the beach fund. Of the golf fund requests, golf fund requested $125,000. We funded $75,000. So provides a residual projects of $50,000. The IT fund, they requested $400,000. We provided $200,000 of funding from the sales tax. So they have a residual amount of $200,000. The CIP funds, $397,000 with a residual of $70,000. And because of the rate setting flexibility with the combined utilities, pretty much everything was funded primarily through new funding, new borrowing, $500,000 from fund balance, and then $784,000 from current year revenues. So the totals are out all the way to the right, but the point I want to emphasize is if you take a look at the cumulative amounts on the bottom of projects not funded, that's $1.2 million. That again, those initiatives, those projects aren't going away. That will still need consideration as we move forward to future years. So if we can turn the page. to page 5, I just want to highlight the projects that were unfunded for the different funds, so you can understand or have an appreciation for, again, those considerations as we move forward. So the windows at the library of $75,000, the tables at Howard Park Pavilion, $25,000, the Sunset Park Pavilion, $35,000, the ball fields, $75,000, fitness equipment, and then various road projects. I know the road projects are of a major conversation, discussion, and you can see that we're funding $5 million a year on the various road projects, which includes ADA sidewalk betterments. So even with that $1 million of funding, it still leaves a residual amount of $530,000 that has not been funded. If we turn the page to page 6, same conversation for the beach fund. The elevator was not funded.
Hello, the time is 6:06.
The casino building, the railings, $35,000. The parking vehicle, interceptor parking vehicle for 65, for a subtotal of 150. Golf fund, the bathrooms, just basically rehab work throughout, carpet, pro shop of $50,000. If we turn to page 7, the IT did $200,000 for security primarily, but the OptiView replacement, fiber channel switch, and security access control systems totaling $200,000. On the CIP fund, we did not fund the park land acquisition of $70,000. And then if we turn to page 8, I'm sorry, yep, page 8, we are now talking about fiscal year 21 as we roll forward. So for fiscal year 21, this presentation is based again on the recommendations that were provided on the fiscal year 2020 plan. This is not anything that is cast in stone for fiscal year 21. You know, we're going to have to have its own separate appropriation for fiscal year 21. You know, for 21 it's a plan. Well, I mean, for 20 it's a plan. For 21 it needs to be appropriations. But based on the conversations last year and what was discussed and what was approved and what was not, I'll go straight down to the bottom. The general fund had $1.4 million of requests. The beach fund of $130,000. Golf fund did not present. The garage fund, $350,000. IT fund, $925,000. Combined utility, almost $38 million for a total of $40 million, almost $40.6 million. So if we can turn to page 9, the funding strategies, if you will, to fund these projects was to take pledge revenue, the pledge revenue bond. And again, just for everybody's familiarity, we are securitizing, if you will, the penny sales tax so that we can go out and do a bond for everything at one time, versus waiting for these revenues as they come in year over year. So that's the pledge revenue bond that you see, sales tax. They are those revenues that are being pledged. So again, most of this is coming from the pledged revenue bond, a little bit through the garage fund from fund balance. Those are the contributions that are made by the different departments for the fleet replacement. And then on the combined utility, they would be coming from a little bit from fund balance, but the majority of it would be coming from the new borrowings. And again, the detail to all this is on that detailed schedule that I provided earlier. But once again, if you look at the bottom line, projects not funded, and these are the funds that have the least capacity, if you will, to generate different revenue streams. We have $1.1 million of projects that have not or were not recommended, again, as part of the 20 plan. But again, not saying that those projects are not important and should not be considered. It's just that we do not have the funding capacity to fund those projects. And so if we turn the page to page 10, you'll see that in fiscal year 21, again, the programs that have not been recommended for funding for the general fund is the Howard basketball court for $80,000, the Manzo ball field lighting for $35,000, the South Bryan playground for $150,000, various road projects of $79,000, and then totaling $344,000 for the general fund. For the beach fund, that would be $30,000. For the IT fund, one of the things that we keep talking about is the ERP system and moving forward with the ERP system. And that's a big undertaking, both time-wise and dollar-wise. But you'll see that
You might want to clarify for the group what ERP means.
okay, the ERP.
Yeah.
Thank you. The ERP system is basically the computer system that all the different departments use for example, the finance department uses the ERP system for the financial reporting, for payroll, for accounts payable. It would be an integrated system theoretically. So the utility department would use it for its accounts receivable. The planning and zoning would use it for their land management purposes. So it's a very comprehensive integrated system with all the departments talking to each other. So the system that we use now is called Naviline. You might have heard about it, and that's it's usable, but it's definitely a dated process or dated software applications. Different people have different opinions about it. You know, if you talk to others, you know, some are very, very supportive. You know, they like it. You know, so it would have to go through a planning process, but essentially that's what the ERP system is. So
We're going to do questions at the end. Is that it? Or
no, please feel free.
Yes, no, actually, I was waiting for the presentation. but
Oh,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry. I'm sorry, Mayor.
You got it. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. So that's the funding or the programs that have not been recommended for funding for fiscal year 20. So if we can turn to page 11. What this slide is trying to present is really a taking the revenues, net revenues of the different funds, and then adding on to that the conversations relative to unfunded projects. for fiscal year 20 and 21. Again, because, arguably those projects that do not have funding are still viable projects that need consideration for funding. So just taking you through the slide a little bit, starting with the general fund. The available funding of net revenues were projected to be a negative $1.3 million. So essentially, there's not excess revenue capacity there. The unfunded projects carried over from fiscal year 2020 is $762,000. And we went through what those projects were comprised of. And the projects for fiscal year 21 totaled $344 million. So if you add those unfunded projects, you have an additional 1,000,001 of unfunded projects. So if you add those two amounts together, if for example, if we say, okay, fine, absorb those projects into the operating budget, we will not have that capacity. It would give us a negative operating revenue of $2.4 million, which of course we can't do. And then to complicate it, going forward, as we know, at the time, last October, we put a 5-year plan together. And there are projects for 22, 23, and fiscal years 24 that also need consideration. So there's a subtotal of an additional $2.2 million of projects for 22, 23, and 24. If you add the 1.2, the $400,000 and the $600,000, that comes out to the $2.2 million. So this is really trying to emphasize that the city has a lot of deferred maintenance and programs that we need to have conversations relative to how to absorb additional projects in. If you take a look at the beach fund is projected to have a negative $115,000 in revenues. The unfunded project carried forward from fiscal year 20 and then 21 is $180,000. So again, no additional capacity, and it only makes the net revenue that much more difficult. And then 22, 23, and 24 projects of additional $170,000. Now, mind you, just as a little tangent here, we're compiling information for additional capital or revised capital. So we're going to be providing the commissioners with a revised capital plan. So some of these numbers will change. And I suspect that they will. But again, you can see the materiality and the sensitivities just by doing a pro forma from fiscal year 20. The golf fund, they have surplus of unfunded projects of $50,000. But as we talk about these different funds, we also have to consider not just the net revenues, but some of these funds, beach fund and golf fund, have negative fund balances that we have to replenish and adopt strategies, which only compounds the complexity of how we can do a capital plan and also a fund balance, prudent fund balance policy. So then working with the IT fund, the IT fund is relatively at break even. Projection for fiscal year 21. Projects that were not funded for fiscal year 20 $200,000 for 21, $775,000 for a total of almost $1 million of projects that have not been funded. And as we roll forward for the IT fund, 22, 23, and 24, you can see it's about ranges from $1 million to $1.5 million for a total of $3.5 million as we move forward. Again, that's primarily the ERP system that we talked about earlier. And there may be different strategies to cope with that. But ultimately, I think the city has to have that conversation about the ERP system and what the strategy is going to be as we move forward. The CIP funds, there's nothing per se outstanding except for the $70,000. Combined utility, because of the rate setting capacities and the different strategies that we're going to be utilizing, the projects were identified for borrowing. So if you go all the way over to the total, and these are primarily governmental funds, the deficit for the governmental piece is $1.3 million, negative $1.4 million. The carrying forward of projects not funded totals $2.3 million. So we're behind by $3.8 million. And then you have $6 million of needs rolling forward into the future years. So if we turn to the last slide, in all honesty, there may be some grants and whatnot that we can pursue. But if we just have the conversation of what we know today per se, and again, just looking at the materiality of all the different demands, the net sales tax tax balance is $7.3 million. And again, this is just a roll forward of fiscal year 20 information. So this is going to change a little bit. There's an earmark pool for the pool of $6 million. And then if we were to take, giving us a remaining balance of about $1.3 million. And then if you take all the different shortages and the additional amounts needed, you'll see that we have $8.6 million of additional needs. We have an $8.6 million of additional needs. So by year 21, this year, we do not have enough capacity, unless we move strategies around to fund any of these capital items. So I know it's a relatively short presentation. Some of you might like that, but this is really the gist of where we are and the constraints that the city is going to have as it moves forward, evaluating the capital program, the funding strategies, and just needs assessment, the general needs assessment of the city.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add, if I could, Bruce, if you're finished.
Yes, sir.
For those of you who've been here longer than Bruce has been here, these issues of the 5-year capital program and its thoroughness and the sheer volume of the deferred capital items was really a conversation about how to budget properly and to plan, combined with the conversation that occurred with when we were looking at the sales tax pot of money, was it last year? And it was very evident that the best practices when you're looking at your budgeting, in the past, we always understood how tight funds were and how it was very difficult for us to bring forward a balanced budget. So a lot of years we really would end up coming down to the budgeting process and you wouldn't see a tremendous amount of detail on all the deferred capital because honestly, there just really, there wasn't any money. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be going through the process of saying, okay, you have to go into this understanding that there's still need out there. There's still a need that's been identified. Either empirically, staff has come up with a plan for, let's say, sidewalks, and rated them in such a way that we can do a spending program. Or in the case of IT, we're going to be having some really big policy conversations about going to the next generation of our programs for the ERP, which is vital for us because our current provider is going to stop providing work on that program. So there's a lot of things that you guys have to look at. It's important to see the whole buffet of what's out there. So I want to compliment Bruce. I know that was a lot, both in the spreadsheet detail that you got, and then in those roll-up numbers by fund and by activity, that there's a lot of unmet need continuing in the city. It's not something that's really new, but we're now quantifying it. We're putting it out there, and it's helping staff, especially with our long-range look on how we develop the plans so that we can apply for grants. One of the things that's not addressed in there was this upcoming CDBG funds. I know there was a conversation about that, and I saw the Howard Park ball fields in there, and I don't know if that's part of what's being discussed. That might be something we've been able to identify a funding source for. So some of it's planning. It helps us look ahead 5 years. It helps us really identify, so that we don't have the worst case scenario. Let's say the public services motor pool building, which is the worst example we always bring up, something that languishes for 20 years before we finally get around to taking care of it. It also helps us prioritize the projects that need to go sooner than later. So I don't want y'all to freak out that all of a sudden you're seeing this tremendous amount of dump of information. It's what we're going to be doing. It's the proper way to have the budget discussion. It's something that Bruce has been able to bring together with his staff and with the departments. So I want to appreciate all the work you put into this, Bruce, and the departments on the call. So I just wanted to kind of give you the longer range clarification of why, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we weren't as detailed. Honestly, we were so busy doing so much and trying to get things balanced. A lot of times you didn't see a lot of these projects, but now we're going to start doing it because it's the proper thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention and ask the city manager, as we move forward, we've just gotten started. Last year, I recommended, after looking at some of the budget items, that we look at finding $1 million to take to Tallahassee to ask for the $2 million. I think we need to start now with our Tallahassee ask. It's going to be very, very hard this year because of everything that's going on in the world, but we need to really have that conversation with this body, exactly what our ask will be. We will continue to look for grants. I work closely with the CRA with a lot of grants that we can push over to the library and everything. So looking at this budget tonight, we can actually sit down and see what grants might match and bring those back. But I think we need to really talk about what our Tallahassee ask is going to be. After last year's budget, I talked to a couple of representatives in Tallahassee, and they said you always have a very good chance of bringing money home if you bring money to the table. So we need to take that into consideration as we move money around and look for funding, what our best ask in Tallahassee and what money we can bring to the table to help complement that. So I think we need to do that, sooner than later because of everything that's going on in the world. I think it's going to catch up with us. So I would suggest that. And then again, any kind of grants or any kind of funding that will offset some of these line items. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Madam Mayor?
Yes.
And that's very good advice. Always, if you've got some skin in the game, and generally a lot of the things that come out of Tallahassee, whether they're grants or allocations, having that match, as you would say, a 50 match or whatever the percentage is, helps with that process greatly. And you're right about that. And we're also realizing I wouldn't call it a silver lining, but there's a tremendous amount of money that's coming down from Washington. There's still conversation about money coming down from Washington. We don't know what it all is going to be to the state, to the county, and to eventually to monies that we can access. And I can tell you that your staff, the department directors and the team here, finance, we're working to get those grant requests ginned up and in. As a matter of fact, we've got, I think, 11 grant requests going in right now for Department of Economic Opportunity in the state level. And those are being launched along with other capital things. So on that big list that Bruce was just talking about, there are things that are ginned up and ready to put those buckets under those right spigots, as they get turned on, because we were as much money as we can bring into the city to help our budget, to help our residents, and to get these projects done. By all means, we're committed to do that. So along with the comment about the legislative process, there's this whole huge grant process that's just really starting to wind up now. And we're in good position. We have 2 sets of consultants helping us out as well. We're not going to miss a dollar if we can help it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I had 2 other things that I forgot to mention. So as we move forward with CDGB funds, we need to be very specific in what we're doing with CDGB funds this year, and make sure that we try to take advantage of the CDGB funds with things that are on our lists, like the city manager had alluded to, things that have been sitting there for years and years and years. And then remember that we, last year with the CDGB funds, or this year, we bought the park up by A Street.
That's right.
And through partnerships with Healthier Lake Worth. Healthier Lake Worth has stepped up. They were actually going to do a check presentation to us. They've stepped up to pay for the actual recreation pieces that we need for that park. So through partnerships like that, I think we can do a lot more this year and just try to think outside the box.
Thank you.
Okay, just a question for you, City Manager and Bruce. When we put together the list of penny sales tax monies for the different projects in the different departments, I just wanted to use IT for an example. When you show the expenditures of capital funds for IT and the amount that they have not funded or will not be funded, is that correct? What of those projects, was that all penny sales tax money that was going for those things, or were there other funds?
Madam Mayor, the direction from even the commission on the sales tax was to fund IT. We called them security related items.
Correct.
I want to say it was close to $900,000 plus dollars.
50, I think it was.
Yeah, and so that's reflected in this budget.
It is. Okay, that's what I wanted to double check.
And that would be the source, would be the sales tax. And once we get the borrowing done against the future sales tax revenues, we'll be able to execute. That's why it hasn't been done just yet, is we got to get the money in the bank to do it. Secondly, the following years in the program is our guesstimation at this point of looking at starting to replace the ERP program, which we need to have some explanations, and it's a major commitment. It's a major piece of infrastructure for us. So that's what that reflects, if I'm correct, Bruce.
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
I just know that whatever goes on in the world, our cybersecurity stuff needs to be intact. I just want to make sure that that was included and completed. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other commissioner questions?
Yeah, back in 2020, you have 65,000 for equipment and vehicles, calling it an interceptor, and that's a water. What is an interceptor?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, please. Thanks.
If I'm correct here, and Lauren's on the call as well, I believe that was the car that was outfitted, the vehicle that had the automatic read systems for the parking. Is that correct, Lauren?
Correct, yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. I like your background.
That's the vehicle and the system for 65,000.
Yes.
But don't think of the old-fashioned, Chrysler police interceptors. That's not what it is.
Okay. So we're having somebody drive that, but we're still going to be paying how much for this person to look at each tag, or it's going to be easier for the person driving the car? Is that it?
Yeah, so it would basically make parking enforcement more efficient. It's actually designed for parking enforcement. I did get to sit in it. It's a very beautiful little three-wheeled vehicle, but basically staff would be able to enforce in inclement weather, and they could actually lean out, slide the door, and chalk as they go by versus having to physically walk by. You can also attach a license plate reader to the vehicle as well. So it's just a modern, more efficient way of parking enforcement.
So it's not a car, it's a scooter.
Like a hybrid. It's
Cushman.
like a three-wheeled little hub of a car. It's
Can we get some more information to the commissioner? If
Yes,
that would help.
Right. Vice Mayor?
Well,
And-
Oh, sorry. Please, no, I'm
and-
sorry. Go ahead. No, he's following up. Commissioner Robinson?
Okay,
I
good.
was going to ask if all the roofing that we're doing is because they're leaking and there's deterioration now, or are these planned expenditures? Just on a 20 or 25-year schedule.
City Manager?
I would have to defer. Is Jamie on the line there? Because I think there were several roof repairs and you would have the dates on the last time they were fixed and what's the status.
Jamie?
He's here.
Turn off your mute.
I got my mute off. I'm trying to get my video on them. There we go.
There you are.
I want to see this.
Yeah, that is true. Those roofs, those are issues we need to address now. That's not something that's on a maintenance schedule. It's actually way over when the actual useful date is. So these are issues that need to be addressed now.
Understatement, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Thank you.
have a question on which roofs they were or they?
No, as long as they're not an aesthetic issue and they're not scheduled just on a 25-year schedule.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I wouldn't walk under him.
No.
Vice Mayor, you're up.
I was gonna go back to Lauren and the vehicle for parking. Is that vehicle, we can use that vehicle for downtown and anywhere else in the city that we may be adding, excuse me, parking issues?
yes, sir.
Okay, so it'll be used all citywide. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, well, I don't see any more hands up, Selena.
Well, I'll throw one.
There you go.
I'll throw one in. It's not a real budget item, but it's a question of income. And if we're going to go out to a public-private partnership for the Oceanfront Park, I guess I'm going to ask when we're going to do that.
City Manager?
Madam Mayor, I know that we're in contact and Assistant City Manager Ruiz is the lead on that project with the consulting firm to bring back the RFP discussions to this commission so y'all can make sure that it contains the parameters that you want to see in any kind of an RFP that we push out. And I'd have to give you a date on when that's currently scheduled. I see Juan just unmuted. Mr. Ruiz?
Ballpark date, year.
Juan, are you there?
He's
Juan?
in Loxahatchee. They have he has to
Well,
contact the telephone.
Do we assume it's going to be this year?
It was my understanding, Commissioner Robinson, it was this year. Yes.
I thought so too.
Yes.
Okay.
Things have been a little delayed due to a couple of items we've been dealing with.
I understand.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
I would be remiss. I actually got a call from Vice Mayor Pro Tem. He wanted to make sure that y'all knew that he actually had another meeting scheduled with some pastors, and he sends his apologies. So I just passed that along. But
Okay.
he's in a meeting with some pastors right now.
All right. Well, thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could jump in to answer Commissioner Robinson's question, I believe Juan can bring something back in August.
For the, that's for the consultant, right?
Yes, I believe so.
That would be presentation from the consultant. We actually already have the consultant.
Yeah, right.
All right, guys. Well, good job, Bruce, and to everyone in finance and to every one of our wonderful staff members.
Thank you.
When is our next budget? What's the next budget meeting? And where do we go next? I know I'm all
It's May,
discombobulated with everything going on and all these extra meetings and meetings here and meetings. Usually this is the time for our budget meeting, so.
Well,
it's in July. I apologize for not knowing it off the top of my head.
Here, I think I have it in my calendar, so if you bear with me.
Okay.
I believe it's the July 23rd,
Okay.
Thank you.
which is a Thursday night.
And that will be getting into detail of the fiscal year 21 operating budgets.
And
I'm
then
hoping
Matt-
to hear from some of those road project things through the TPA. We've got those projects coming through too, so maybe that'll help us out a little bit too.
And so, Madam Mayor, if I could, your next meeting is the 30th. You have 2 items on there. You have the electric utility item. Ed was bringing back the policy on how we were going to move forward with the dealing with the suspension of the accounts, the deposits, and how y'all had directed to handle that. So that's coming back. And then also on that same night is the second reading on the ordinance involving the Bohemian project.
Okay.
And then your next regular meeting is on the 7th, Tuesday.
Okay.
And so it's your calendar has been daunting. I don't know. As long as I've worked at the city, I don't remember keeping a schedule where we're meeting so many times.
I don't either.
But there is a tremendous amount of work being done, and to all of the elected officials, we're very grateful for y'all taking the time, effort, and energy to not only do all the other things you're doing, but to help us through all these policy meetings and discussions. It's an important part of what we do, and we're grateful for your time and energy.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, fellow commissioners. Look forward to seeing you next time. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night.
staff.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to all your staff. Please give them our regards and thanks.
Will
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.